Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's event. Thank you so much for being here. Real quick, for anyone who is going to be watching online, you'll notice there's a link below that will take you to our website where you can still order books for Mr. Wesley Chu and Peter Clines. For those who don't know, Wesley Chu is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of 12 published novels, including Time Salvager, The Rise of I.O., and The Walking Dead Typhoon. Even more impressive, in my opinion, he is a martial artist and a former member of the Screen Actors Guild. In conversation tonight, we have Peter Clines, who, of course, is the toy-collecting, movie-loving, New York Times bestselling author of Paradox Bound, Terminus, The Fold, more recently, The Broken Room, and is a wonderful and great supporter of the bookstore. So let's go ahead and give it up for Wesley Chu and Peter Clines.
Right. Am I here?
Yeah, here.
Oh, I gotta be here. All right.
Camera. I don't matter.
Thanks for showing up, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Hello?
Oh, jeez. Sorry about that, too.
And then the feedback began.
All right. What's up? How's everybody doing? Sorry, that kind of cracks me up. So,
Hey,
what's up? I haven't seen other human beings in like 3 years, so this is probably the most people I've seen in a room with me for a while.
we were just figuring out that the last time we actually saw each other was a Halloween party 4.5 years ago.
It was 2019 in like November, like Halloween or something like that, and that was it. And then I've seen like 8 other human beings since then until Comic-Con, like, last week. And then there's a whole bunch of people there.
That was not unnerving at all.
Yeah.
So you wrote a new book,
I have.
and it's freaking awesome.
Thank you. I think so too.
I have like I don't know. Do you want to like try and give them a quick summary, and then I will pest you with all my questions. Who cares what they?
All right. So I'm gonna put this down a little bit. So I'm not gonna lie. I kind of suck at elevator pitches. So if you were to ask me like what this book's about, I probably could not tell you in a very succinct way. What I'll do is I'll ramble. But so the Art of Prophecy is kind of like my love letter to wuxia movies. When I first moved to the U.S., I think back in '82, we immigrated to Nebraska. So like back in the '80s in Nebraska, why is there somebody else from Nebraska here? Close enough, yeah. Cornhuskers. So when we first immigrated to Nebraska, there's back in the '80s, there's like 4 or 5 Asian people, and like 4 of them were in my family. So, and then back during that time, we there was a lot of emphasis on like, okay, we're here, we're immigrants. Let's just like blend in. Let's just blend in and not make any ruckuses. So it's a different time back then. So as a 5-year-old kid who didn't speak English, and it was weird to focus so much on like merging with American society. So at one point I started to wonder like what's like being from Taiwan, like what is it like being back in Taiwan? Well, what is my culture like? What is the home country like? And back in the '80s there wasn't that much information, so I ended up discovering something called Samurai Sunday. Which, does anybody remember Samurai Sunday? Yeah, Samurai Sunday is where they took all those old wuxia movies, and then they like put really bad English dub on it, and it was glorious. And that's how I learned about Asian culture, was through Samurai. So I thought everybody fought and flew. So eventually I grew up and the internet came about and everything. But what those movies did for me was it kind of developed a really lifelong passion for martial arts and like flying, like personal flying. And I've tried this many times as a kid to jump off roofs and stuff. It was not a good thing to do. So when I
skip across rooftops.
I've tried. Oh yeah, I've done that before. That was not smart either, because once you hit a certain slant on a roof, you're just gonna fall down, and that's what bushes are for. So, So ever since I started writing, the idea of writing a wuxia story has always been with me. I spent many years learning kung fu and, studied like wushu and bagua, xingyi, tai chi. Anybody? But yeah, awesome. What did you study? Oh, Charlie, very traditional. Yang style. So I wanted to write a wuxia story ever since I started publishing in 2013, and the idea for the War Saga, which is the title of the series, kind of sat with me and it's kind of simmered in my head. But at the time, I was a science fiction author, and the idea of writing something like, I wasn't sure the American audience was ready for this. And on top of that, I wasn't sure I was ready for it. It's the Asian epic fantasy using writing wuxia, which is a very visual medium, very visual storytelling, and putting that on long form prose is kind of risky. So it took me like 10, 11 books before I finally sat down and was like, okay, I can write this. Now, I didn't answer your question because I didn't tell you what it was about. But the Art of Prophecy. What? Sorry,
Didn't you?
Did I? Well, it's my love. It is my love letter wuxia, and it's kind of like it took everything that I've ever wanted to write, or everything I ever loved, and I put it all together in like one story, and that's the baby right there. So that's what it's about.
Okay. And we were talking about this behind the scenes here before. One thing I thought, I got to read this early. Perks. But it struck me, I was trying to describe it to my partner, that it very much in a way feels like, I'm also a fan of the wuxia movies. Probably not as much as some, but I have a strong appreciation.
You're a fan of movies. I always listen to your. You watch a lot of movies, and then you kind of deconstruct them on social media. I really appreciate that.
But one of the things I love about this is, I was thinking about it's kind of like Hot Fuzz, where it is, in a way, a total deconstruction, poking fun at so many of the tropes of these sort of stories, and yet at the same time, it is one of the most loving, like really solid versions of one of these stories you've seen in years. That is like Hot Fuzz is 100% a buddy cop movie. At the same time, it is poking fun at so many conventions of buddy cop movies when it does it, and that trope is ha ha ha, and that's kind of what this is doing on one level. That every time you would, without giving anything away, you would start to like have something really serious, and then somebody would just start making these asides or having these like internal monologues about, oh my god, I can't believe I'm doing this, I can't believe I'm doing that, and and it was just wonderful. It is, and I mean this in a very positive way. It is a very fun read. Like there are books that like
when is fun read?
Well, is there
a negative way?
I think we can in a because that's it. I think some people hear fun and they're like, oh, so it's a comedy.
A fantasy tends to be very serious.
Yeah, and that's just it. I think there are books that you can enjoy, but they can be like, it's effort to read them sometimes. It's work. And one of the things I loved about this was like every time I picked it up, I didn't want to put it down, and I would basically just like read until I was like, okay, it's 3 a.m, I gotta go. Because it's just fun. It's like it is. I know you were just saying you were really worried about adapting something so visual into a long form, but you did such a great job with it.
Thanks.
And it made me like, it was just like watching a movie in the sense that you had such great description. And I want to talk about that real quick.
Right.
Personally, as a writer, and anyone who's ever written my stuff knows, I like action to be fast. I'm a big fan of. I have like sort of this quiet rule I've told people about. I don't think action should take much longer to read than it should if it was actually happening. So I'm not a fan of like, there are people out there who will spend half a page to describe one punch, and I think it is amazing how often you are dropping technique names, style names, all this stuff in during a fight, and yet it's still flying. It's moving so fast. And I have to admit, I was super jealous of that. He pulled that off.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so That's a very long question without actually being a question.
It
So
wasn't a question, was it?
was it?
It wasn't.
Well, let me break it down. Okay, so
How do you write, Wes?
how do I write?
Teach us.
How does writing work?
Teach us your ways.
No, but so I mean, I grew up in the '80s on like big fantasies. When I was a kid, when I was like 5 years old, we just came to this country. I'm going to start there. You know, my father was an English professor, and one of the first things he did was like he to teach me to read English and understand understand English and speak, because my first word was no for like the first 3 months. He took me to a bookstore and he was like, you can pick a book and it'll help you teach you how to read. And he's an English professor, so he took me to like, I don't know, he wanted me to read like Midsummer Night's Dream or something like that, or Beowulf or something that really would have screwed me up. But instead, I ran to the corner of the bookstore that had like all the pictures of like dragons and shiny swords and everything. And the two books I actually got were The Misenchanted Sword by Lawrence Walt Evans and A Spell for Chameleon by Piers Anthony. And like, if anybody's read the Xanth series, those things are like, they're 38 books. And I got up to 18, I think. I think 18 was like...
I think Piers Anthony's shortest series is like 7 books.
Yeah, I don't know how he does it. But like, I got all the way up to like the book called The Color of Her Panties. Yes, that was the actual name of a fantasy novel. So I read like Wheel of Time or Game of Thrones. So I love writing like just big long books. But then I've also read so many of these fantasy books that when it came down to my turn to like try to give writing fantasy a go, I didn't want to write the same stories about like prophecy. I wanted to write about prophecy and like destiny and fate and like the chosen one thing, but I wanted to write it in a way where give it like a fresh coat of paint, to make a left turn when everybody expects you to make a right turn. And in terms of like for the Art of Prophecy, the main character is an older handicapped woman, and the chosen one is actually a younger teenage boy. So it's the dynamic is different, and I've been told a few times that it's a relatively rare dynamic to have an older woman master and a younger man. So I just kind of looked at all these things that I read as a kid. And then, and a lot of these things kind of bothered me a little bit, like why is prophecy so important? What happens if it breaks? What if everything has an ulterior motive? And, what if there's capitalism in a way where capitalism is more important than fate? So I took a lot of these ideas and just threw them all together and made it feel like real to me. So like I said, sometimes when you're talking about certain things and in their thought process or whatever, they're like, that's kind of dumb. And you know what? It is kind of dumb. And if it's kind of dumb, well, let's explore why it's kind of dumb, and let's just make it real. As for the action scenes, that took a lot of time to many years to fine tune, because in the Lives of Tao, just my debut novel, I prided myself on like long, beautiful fight scenes. I would have like these ridiculous like 2-3 page fight scenes, and in initial drafts, my wife was like, "Oh, you're just like playing with yourself now at this point, this is ridiculous." And it's one of those things where like my agent was like, "You should read some Lee Childs." Lee Childs is a master of action scenes, because he will literally have half a page of like talking about setting up the fight, and then the fight's gonna be like headbutt, and then it's over. So I had to find a happy middle ground between Lee Childs and myself. So and with the Art of Prophecy, it's because it's wuxia, you do have to kind of flavor the text and flavor the fights in a way that makes it real to the genre. So it was a balancing act of like keeping it real while not falling that trap of writing long fight scenes that end up getting boring.
You actually, how long did it take to write this? A tricky question, I know, because it's always like
it was a lot. It took a lot less time than writing the sequel, that's for sure. So I wrote the first one. So initially, the first act, which is 55,000 words, if anybody's keeping track, was initially a prologue. And so I was going to write a 15,000 word prologue, and that's what we were going to sell to the publisher. And then, it ended up being 55,000 words. It became an act. And then it just grew from there. It just got longer and longer. But so I wrote the first act by October of 2019. Okay. Then we went on submission. We sold the book to Del Rey, and we sold the option for it. And then I was supposed to write the rest of the book in 2021. I'm sorry, 2020. And we all know what happened in 2020, right? Where like all the schools shut down, and I had like a 6-month-old and a 4-year-old, and it was an interesting time. So I did finish the book in August of 2020. Okay. And then so that took me like a year and like change to write. And it took me like 3 years to write the second book, which I'm not done yet. So, yeah, that's how long it took me to write. So I think about, book 2 was supposed to be due today. Today's the 9th, right? Yeah, it's literally due today. My editor's like, "What are you doing? Why aren't you at home working your book?" No, but yeah, it's due today, literally today, and I should hopefully get it in within 2 weeks.
They made your book due on launch day.
Well, you know what? Well, they made it due on. Okay, let me take that back. They didn't make it due on launch date because it was actually due a year ago. Because because when I signed the contract, my editor was like, okay, so
August 9th. I didn't mean this year.
They go. When do you want to hand in book 2 and 3? And at the time, I was writing shorter books. I was like writing a lot more confidently. So I was like, I've never been late for a book in my life. I'll get it there in a year. And a year came by, and I was like, I have like 60,000 words. I'm going to need a lot more time. So they gave me another year, and I still didn't make it. So there goes my perfect record of like being on time. So yeah. So they didn't make it due on launch day. I made it due on launch day, and I still screwed up.
Let me ask. Okay, because you've been putting a lot of really cool art that they've been doing. Very cool.
Yes.
And some of the art, if you haven't seen it, you can go look it up on Twitter and Instagram and everything. Some of the art bears resemblance, we could say, to certain known actors. Here.
Yeah.
Some of the different roles. My question for you: how much of this? Okay, like I know a lot of people talk about fan casting. That like when I'm writing the book, I always pictured this person as, this actor is this character, this actor is this character. Both of us used to work in the film industry. And so because of it, I'm like painfully aware of what the odds are that the people I picture will ever be playing the roles that I'm thinking of. So very early on, I just sort of got thinking, don't care. I'll picture my own. Were you picturing these, or was it kind of a surprise to you when they showed up the art? They showed you the art.
So the artwork I showed you that I put online actually was from a Marvel artist called Lee Garbett, and he was hired by the people who optioned Sony optioned the War Art Saga in 2019. Okay. And usually when you option something for television, you have to go through this whole process. Like you create a proposal, a pitch, and then you attach directors and showrunners and everything. And once they have the package, you go on proposal. Proposal, I guess. Yeah, you pitch. You go on pitch. So what happened was one of the things they did was they hired a Marvel illustrator to like draw the characters. And I'm not one of those people who like visualize certain actors for any of my books. The only people that I ever visualized ahead of time was in my debut novel, where I basically wrote myself into the book. Funny story about that. I wrote during the early early draft of the Lives of Tao. I let my dad read it. He's an English professor, and he came back to me. He was like, "Son, I read your book. It's good. There's no problem with it though. Your main character. He's likable, but he's not that likable. Is he modeled after you?" So that was the last time I had a character. I had visualized the character ahead of time, and then and I'm not gonna lie. I mean, with the Art of Prophecy, you know, the main character Taishi, who is the older disabled master war artist, not pictured Michelle Yeoh. I mean, because that's what you do when you think of she is the standard for female wushu masters. So
I have to personally, I pictured Ming No Wen.
you know what? I thought of her too as somebody. Well, I thought of her too, but Michelle Yeoh was always going to be my queen. You know.
Yeah.
And I mean, at one point I was like, "Oh, babe, maybe we can get her before she gets too big." And then Everything Everywhere at Once came out, and I was like, "Never mind, never mind." Or not. That's not going to happen now.
And she got her own Star Trek spin-off show. And
Oh, she's her own Star Trek spin-off show.
Yeah.
Ah,
Did you know? Spoilers for Discovery. You know at the end how she and her last bit of Discovery.
I bounced off the last season of this. Oh, we shouldn't say that on. Anyways, yes.
We love Discovery.
I love Michelle Yeoh. Michelle Yeoh, I love you. No, but oh, she got her own show.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, awesome. Okay, but yeah, so she was the only person that I've ever visualized for this scene, and like obviously, so did everybody else, because when the Marvel Illustrator came back, it looked just like her, and I was like, that's good. We're good. I'm good at that. But yeah.
How about similar note? Because you just actually, I think you just put this up today. I already thought about asking about it. The maps that you have. This is, without giving too much away. Okay, this is not set on Earth.
Yes.
And because of this, there's a lot of travel. There's some amazing settings in this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love the grass sea. I love the idea of the sand snake. It's fantastic. You're all going to have to read it. But then, like, when I think most of us, if we ever have to do like a sprawling story, we end up sketching out like you showed you did. We get the sheet of notebook paper and we're like, this is here, this is over here, that's that.
I mean, you saw my back of the napkin drawing, right? It was like a white piece of paper. I wrote like a circle, a little circle in it, and it had little jagged things on one side.
I had to map out a Moonbase once, and I put up a picture. I did the whole thing like on a legal pad.
Yeah.
So like, it's an oval, and there's something coming off there.
I mean, what happens is like you draw something very basic, and then when it's time to draw a map, the editor's like, okay, you need to give me some rough sketch. So I spent like 2 days like creating this complex map, and then they go, we don't need that much, because you know. So honestly, the end product, the two artists for this book. First one is Tran Nguyen, who did the cover, and second one is Sunga Park, and both of them knocked it out of. I mean, they just. I almost said Sunga Park knocked it out of the park, but they did an amazing job. I mean, I think it's the best map in fantasy, and I think it's the best cover in fantasy, and you can't prove me wrong. So yes, I am thrilled with how this map in this book kind of like came together at the very end.
There's so much I like about this book, and I know we said before we don't want to give too much away.
Okay.
About it, Tony.
We could ask them.
You could ask.
Like if we have a spoiler that in chapter 3. If we have a spoiler in chapter 3, is that okay?
Like who like how far into the book would you want to know ahead of time? You're reading it like we spoiled chapter 4. You're just gonna like.
Is anybody not okay? If you're not okay, we're not going to talk about it.
You can talk about it. We'll do it tonight.
All right.
Fair point.
All right. What you got?
What I love about this is, and you kind of brushed up against this already, is there's a wonderful ruthlessness. I talk about how do we dispose of tropes. At what point did you realize this whole idea of we literally have our hero, and once we find out, what's it, chapter 2, we find out that the prophecy has failed.
Yes. 3. Yes.
3, is it 3?
That's when the Khan gets drunk and.
The eternal Khan, immortal warrior of the grass, is killed. I just told you, chapter 3. But then we literally have all these people just march in and immediately say like, "Wow, guess we wasted a lot of money training this kid."
I'm just keeping it real, dude.
I know, but like I'm curious. Like, okay, you were saying this was going to be prologue originally, like. So this was something like all along, or did this become part of the thing as it expanded and you realized, like you were saying, you should bring capitalism, politics, all this stuff into it that is not usually, at least in my experience, as strong an element in the wuxia stories, and you've made it like this is literally what started the whole thing off is petty bitching about money.
I mean, it's kind of like when I think about how like real life works, you know, and like for example, like in the Wheel of Time, you talk about like how there's Randall Tor goes through all this thing, all these things fall in this prophecy, but the reality of it is people care about what they care about, and what they care about is what's within arm's length. So when you have something so like out there, like the prophecy is going to save all of us, what does that mean to individual people? You know, so if you're taking a ruler who is supporting this religion, and the religion just totally flops, what are they going to feel? You know, I mean, I'm a big fan of the whole idea of like cause and effect. Nothing exists in isolation. So if you're going to create a character, the character has to exist in a space where he is who he is. You know, they are layered by their surroundings. If a mountain is a certain way, or I'm sorry, if like an army operates in a certain way and fights with a certain style and uses a certain type of shield and weapon, how did it come about? What made them, you know, what made them like line up like this? What made them kind of wear their armor in a certain way or carry their shield in a certain way? So these things all matter. So when it comes to prophecy, a prophecy can't exist in isolation. You know, it has to be supported by the ruling class. It has to have a religion around it. It has to have all these things. But if you look at religion, there's a scene where like there's a monk who is in charge of a temple, and and he is extremely religious, but he's also extremely practical because temples cost money to run. So he has systems that are like, you know, we take tithes, and if you want to cut in line, you got to pay an extra coin for this, you know. So there's these things that sound kind of like strange because it's not really religious, but it makes sense based off how people live.
Yeah. Okay.
Is there a question? I forgot the question.
That's close.
Yeah. All right.
Let me ask you. This is more just a me thing.
Okay.
Like I said, I kind of dabble in the wuxia stuff. Like we said, I'm a fan, but I'm not a diehard fan who can run off hundreds of movies, all that. When you choose to write in a certain genre, there's always going to be these certain expectations, certain benchmarks, established things that like if I say I'm going to write a vampire story,
Okay.
then we expect that there are going to be fangs, it's going to drink blood, there's going to be coffins and sunlight and garlic and all these sort of these regular elements that show up. Going through this, we have things like the tongue, the viper strikes, the wind whisperer, all this. How much of this is just 100% you filling that space, and how much of it actually stuff you pulled that, like, this is a type of character that shows up? And I know that is a tricky question.
I mean, okay, so I feel like a lot of it is I'm trying to explain. For example, like you watch a wuxia movie and people are flying over the place, right? How are they flying? Like, what are they doing to make it fly? And I never thought about that. It's like, are they jumping really hard? Do they make their weight really light? I mean, I don't know. And I've never figured it out. And I never thought about it because they're just flying and it's cool. But then once I started writing it, I had to explain like why they're able to fly, you know? And if 3 people can fly, they could all be flying different ways. One person could be like really big calves and he's just like bounding up in the air. Another person could be riding the wind. So once I had to break things down so that it's kind of practical, then it became a lot of fun because, you know, one of the sayings I always have when I practice martial arts was that, you know, at the end of the day, all styles end in the same place. you know, and it's all free form at the very end. We might learn certain forms, certain styles, certain techniques, certain stances, but at the end of the day, you are trying to create body efficiency with how you fight. And I applied that concept to all the war arts in the book. Is everybody fights a different way, and they could be all doing the exact same thing, just 4 or 5 different ways of doing it. Okay.
I think that answers it.
Did it?
Yeah.
I'm really bad at answering questions, so I'm sorry.
What is your favorite color?
Blue.
Okay. See.
God.
Okay, I'm trying to think. We talked about some stuff out back, and I'm trying not to be repetitive, but then I'm like, okay, am I being repetitive?
I don't know.
Well,
Should we get some questions?
is it? Oh, is it?
It's 7:30.
Oh, okay.
Are there any questions? You. Find wizard. Wait, let me think about it.
Technically,
What makes a wizard a wizard? I mean, what is magic? Okay, so yes, there are rogues and magic. You can form a full D&D group with the characters in this book. That's not true, actually. I take that back. You cannot. I know. Yes, I do. I'm a cleric. You can form a full D&D group. I will own that.
you technically have 2 because you even have another one off camera.
Yeah, but she's just a master. She's just a teacher.
The apprentices.
Yeah, she's the main. Yeah, anyways, we'll get to that.
You could form a.
Wait, who? But, I have a tank.
Yeah.
I have a tank. I have
Okay. Thief.
a fighter, a thief,
Clever.
a paladin. No,
Sean is like he's like the wannabe paladin.
he's a piece of clay.
Actually, you know who's the paladin?
Who?
The first at the school, at the war school.
Oh yeah. Okay, done. Full D&D group, we got it. There is no illusionist though, because nobody needs those guys.
On the online chat, was there a supporting character that changed from a utility-oriented final
So yes, there's a character named Shinde who I'm a big fan of, and I think he's an extremely layered character. Initially, he was just going to be like a very stereotypical, like elder kind of like older student who kind of takes care of everybody.
We were just talking.
Yeah, but I find him fascinating, and I've layered him in a way that he's a secondary character. But you're probably going to see him throughout the entire series. I'm not going to give anything away, though. Any other questions?
I avoided this question because I figured it was.
I know. I got like kids, man. I spent a lot of time like in preparation for writing. I spent a lot of time sitting in my garage, staring at the wall. I drop off the kids. I sit at the wall. I stare for a while. I go to my office. I play Magic the Gathering because that's how I procrastinate. And then I write just like really, really poorly for a few hours, and then I have dinner, and then at night between like 9 to 2 a.m. that's when I actually get a lot of writing done.
Do you set like a daily goal for yourself, either time wise or word count wise?
I used to, but then the word count just got sad. Like before I had kids, I was averaging like 2,000 words a day, and that was like, okay, a good day is like 2,500, bad day is like 1,600 because that's NaNoWriMo. You need 1,667 words to win NaNoWriMo in a month. And that's what I used to do. And then now I think if I get 1,000 a day, I'll be pretty lucky. Yeah. Is that, I mean,
I was the same way. For the longest time, 2,000 was like my benchmark. And for a long time, I didn't have trouble hitting it. Because I between working in film and becoming a full-time novelist, I worked as a journalist. And I just like, you have deadlines.
Right.
Daily, weekly deadlines. So I was constantly, I have to write. So my first couple books, I was just like, bam, 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 bam. And then really about 5-6 years ago, it was
At 5-6 years ago, how many books have you already written?
5-6 years ago, I had written 9.
Around that time, maybe 9 or 10, it was kind of like when I had to really slow down. And I'm not sure why, but I have a theory. But finish. But
I would love to hear it.
well, my theory.
Give me a rationale.
Okay, my theory is that the more skilled you are, the more experienced you are at writing, the harder it becomes.
Yeah, okay. I've had similar thoughts, but I think
Right. I mean, I always say that like every book I'm writing is the hardest book I've ever written, or is it the other way around? Every book I've written is harder. Anyways, but it gets harder, and you think that in most professions, it gets easier. You know, once you've been a lawyer for a long time, you know the law better, and when you do whatever thing lawyer does, you're more comfortable with it. That's the same with programming. It's the same with a lot of industries. But when it comes to writing, it feels like it's always continually getting harder, even though I'm better at it and I'm telling better stories.
but you're under pressure to tell even better stories.
Right.
Like obviously the sequel to the next book has to be bigger and better than this book.
I mean, it's bigger for sure.
And then when you start a new series after that has
Well,
everything has to be like just that little bit better than the last one, bigger than the last one. And so we have this like constant. We start second guessing ourselves.
You second guess yourselves.
When we're starting out, we basically have the bliss of ignorance.
You're more confident.
Yes,
You're confident
we have no idea.
in your ignorance. Yeah. and then as you become more experienced, you're more attentive to like the layers of the storytelling. So a character isn't just a guy doing this. He's a guy doing this because he has this backstory, and this backstory influences how he thinks about certain things.
But now that means you have to go back to that last chapter,
Right.
because now, like how often this happens to me a lot, that I'll be writing a book. Like I'm in probably the third act of a pretty big book right now, writing the first draft, and I have like a 12-page separate document of notes to myself, like, okay, for the second draft of this, I came up with this cool character.
It's your bug sheet. Yeah.
Yeah, this cool idea for this person. So when I rewrite everything this character does, I have to remember to include this angle, this view with it, and this character this, and this character.
Well, I mean, are you an outliner?
I am an outliner, but I'm also someone who, like, I will come up with an outline. I hate outlines for a long time, because I would come up with an outline and then I would stick to it so rigidly that even when I came up with something, even when the story would organically go another way, I would try to stick to the outline, and my first draft would end up feeling very forced and twisted and forced.
Right.
I've gotten much better with them and having like space in them. What I found out I'm generally pretty good with is plot stuff. I will outline out.
Right.
This is a thing, I heard this years ago. There's a screenwriter named Shane Black. And years ago I got to talk to him about this thing, and he gave me this great little bit that plot is what happens outside your characters. Story is what happens inside your characters.
Okay.
I'm a big believer in outlining plot. That I need to know like where we're starting, where we're ending. It's the story stuff as I go through that I will suddenly come to realize, why this person gets. I've been writing this as an angry person because of this, in their backstory. And then once I know that, I sort of want to go back and finesse stuff, and then that is also going to tweak the thought of it.
Right.
How some things are going to happen. I literally just, I was almost late here because I was writing this chapter and realized one of the reasons it wasn't working was I knew plot-wise a lot of this stuff needed to be happening right now, but story-wise, this needed to be happening. So I'd outlined it all for this big thing, but it just wasn't working. I finally realized the problem is I've literally tried to make, without really explaining anything, a scene with like 10 people sitting at a table, and kind of like we're having this conversation and you're having this conversation. And I realized what I really need, so as it sounds, is like 30 people at the table. So these three characters can just sort of be sitting over here totally off to the side, actually having their stuff, well, this is all going, that other conversation's going on in the background. But that was not how it was outlined. It's just something that became, second draft, fix this.
Right. I mean, I used to be like I used to write for like one of the books I was co-writing with Cassandra Clare. We did for the Red Scrolls of Magic. I wrote a 22,000 word outline, and that was the last time I did a big outline. But what I learned that was oftentimes, we write outline because we want to end at a certain point. We need our characters or the plot to be at a certain point so we can move on to whatever, or we can end the book. And one thing I started doing was that my characters would, I want them to make a right turn. They want to go left. I want them to do this. And they're like, I don't feel like doing it. And whenever you force a character to do something that they innately, organically don't want to do, it feels very false. So what I started doing was I just let them do it. And then I would let them do it, and then I would re-outline. And so by the time I finish a book, I would be on draft 8.6 or something like that, because I kept rewriting the outline to accommodate the characters who make their own choices. And now what I do is, because I do that so often and I let them make their own choices so often, I stopped outlining the entire book. So I would outline by acts. Act 1 is how much I would outline, and it only goes to 12, 14 chapters. And I let the characters, I guide them, but then I let them make their own choices. And once they make their own choices, hopefully I end up in a place that I can kind of recover from. But I rather have them make their own choices than me force them into doing something else. And then once I hit the first act, then I do the second act. That way it kind of feels like I'm kind of pantsing it, but I'm also kind of plotting at the same time. It's kind of like the best of both worlds.
I mean, that's one of the cool things with writing, that literally, I don't think I know any two writers who write the same thing.
Yeah.
That everybody just ends up and we find our own thing, but at the same time, we're always flailing and solving all the same problems.
I mean, if there was a formula for success, we would all do it.
We would know.
We would all copy each other.
We would have paid big money for
it. We would all be the Golden State Warriors, We just... Anyways, yeah.
How many books will be there in the series?
There will be 3.
What originally?
I mean, it was originally plotted as a 3-book series, and at one point I was like, I need 5 to make this really real and rich and fully detailed. But 5 books is very exhausting. To be honest, 3 books, writing 3 books in the same world is also very exhausting. So I think 3 is probably the right number for it.
Do you listen to music or sound when crafting? If so, when did you listen to the art process?
So Penguin Random House actually has a playlist on Spotify, and it's probably something no one will like, because they're like, pick your songs, and I'm like, I'm going to combine classical with rap. So I have this weird playlist that that combines classical with rap, and we haven't announced it yet, just because it's one of those things you put on social media, and that's what I listen to, and I'm sure most people will be like, what the hell is this? And I'm okay with that.
At what point of your craft can you mention your very last line?
Ooh, I mean, you know what? I was going to say it very early, but I realized that I didn't realize I ended the book until I ended the book.
Like you just got that point of
what happened? Well, because what happens with my epilogues is when I start working epilogues, I'm like, I'm ending this book. Yeah. But then, but I want to give the right kind of closure to all my characters. And sometimes my epilogues become 5 chapters. But then nobody wants, how you ever seen those movies where the climax happens and the hero wins, but then there's another half an hour of whatever happening. I don't really like those, because I feel like...
Is this a Lord of the Rings subject?
You know what? I always dove in Lord of the Rings, so I'm not quite sure how it ended. They got him, right? No, I'm kidding. No, but it's... Look, I had a movie in mind, but I'm not gonna say it. But it's like you have only so many pages you should write after the good guys win or whatever it is, because after it gets long very quickly. But with the Heart of Prophecy there's 4 points of views, and I have there's several characters, and it's an epic fantasy. But for that book, I was writing a certain scene, and I thought that was the end. But then I realized that there's one thing I had to add at the very, very end, which I did, and I made it short because of that. But yeah, it was one of those things where I didn't know I was ending the book until literally I was writing the very last sentence. Are we good? Let's see. I forgot the name of the book.
But it's gripping.
Hang on one second. I'm gonna. It's a new book that came. So one of the things.
I just got Chuck Wendig's.
Okay.
So where was this?
One of the things about being a writer is you don't often is you're reading the part of your brain that reads is also the part of your brain that writes. So I had a lot of often I do a lot. I don't read as much as I used to, and I wish I could read more. But it's the same exhausting part of your brain that's always writing. And also another part is I tend to get a lot of books to blurb. And if you're reading those books, then you're not reading other books. But I just finished. Oh my gosh, what is that? What is that book by Interior Chinatown? I just finished it, and I forget. It's by Charles Yu. It just won a National Book Award, and he's really, really smart, and he's really, really talented. And I kind of hate him for that. He's actually really nice too. So I hate him. They're all good at everything. But it's a brilliant book. And it's kind of a deconstruction of like they imagine. Have you ever read that book?
I've not.
It's amazing. It's like you took an actual Chinatown, and then they made everybody actors in like a very stereotypical actors. So so it's written as a screenplay. It's crazy. And I read it and I was like, I don't understand how he conceived it, but but the guy's a genius. So, I mean, if you were to read one Asian book, I guess you should read Interior Chinatown. But if you read two Asian books, I guess this one works too.
Can I ask you one last question before we go? Because you actually just said something to me. Have you ever put anything down because it's too similar to something you're doing?
I'm sorry, what?
Have you ever put anything down, like you started reading something, and
I don't know.
Alexa, quiet.
Alexa, be quiet. Siri, it's not about you all the time, okay?
Have you ever been reading something and just realized for whatever reason it's, or maybe listen to something podcast-wise, whatever, and realize it's too close to something you're working on? And like you were just saying, since they are the same parts of our brain,
right?
And just like, I don't want to risk listening to any more of this.
You know what? I don't have that problem because I think, look, at the end of the day, it's not about the idea. You know, great ideas are a dime a dozen. You can. There are 1,000 books on zombies out there, but if you write a zombie book, what? No, you did. Right? I loved your zombie books, but it's not about zombies. It's about the characters in the story. You know, so even though there's a reason why there's like a ton of vampire books and vampires are cool, but also. Just because the vampires, the idea of the vampire and the characters and, the species or whatever it is a concept. It's about the individual story. So even though there are ideas that might come across something similar to what I'm doing, only I can write the story that I'm writing. So I'm not worried about I'm gonna cop off Twilight or something, because even if I copped off Twilight, my Twilight story would be very different from that Twilight story, even though personally I would like to have that Twilight story success. But I can't write that story. So I don't worry about that.
That's true.
All right.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Let's give it to Wesley Chu. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in online and asking some great questions. We're going to go ahead and stop the stream right now. It's going to be the signing portion. So if you have any books by Wesley Chu or Peter Clines that you want to get signed, we're going to bring you on up and we'll grab you some pens shortly. So thank you so much and have a good night, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, bud. Appreciate it.